Hi, this is Carl Stryken, the fireman from Twin Peaks, and you're listening to Without Your Head.
Welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neal, and I'm joined by Richard Neal, star of Prodigy. It's good to have you here.
Hey, man. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. So, for people not aware, can you explain to them, without spoiling it, what Prodigy is about?
Without spoiling it, let's see. Prodigy. Prodigy. Well, prodigy, the word itself, refers to this young girl who's about 9 years old. And she's, I guess, a child prodigy in that she's sort of off the charts, her intelligence, and she has special powers, telekinetic powers that she can, I guess, wreak havoc, and is responsible for an event in her past that has led her to be basically a prisoner in this military compound. There's a colonel figure, sort of on the surface, at least, sort of the villain of the piece. And there are other military personnel and some therapists who've been examining her and kind of worried about the ramifications of having such powers. And anyway, I'm brought in. I'm a therapist who has worked with troubled youth in the past, and I'm brought in into this compound by this former colleague of mine from college, who now works for the military, and as a sort of last-ditch attempt to kind of save her and rescue her from the machinations that seem to be conspiring to basically do her in here, all in the name of national security.
It's a really unique film because it's really heavily dialogue driven.
I hope I didn't make it. I just thought hopefully everybody else didn't turn off there. It was such a dry description of it.
No.
But there's a lot of therapy sessions. It's sort of a cat and mouse game between myself, this therapist who's kind of a lone wolf, so to speak. He himself has had a certain trauma in his past that we discovered during the course of the film that connects him to this patient. They have a sort of common pain that occurred in their past that connects them in a way, and that gives him a kind of insight into how to deal with her. And he spends a lot of his time as a loner playing chess as sort of his therapy. And so this is it works as a kind of a metaphor, this sort of chess match of two minds and she exposes a kind of weakness during our chess game. And I can take advantage and basically reveal the child within to make her more sympathetic. And so the other forces can see, well, maybe not all hope is lost. Maybe there's a little girl who really needs help.
Yeah. That's a really
but there's a lot of go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say that's a really powerful scene, the chess scene, and a real turning point in the movie where I think you see different sides of both characters.
Yeah, well, I think so. I appreciate that. Yeah. There's a lot of dialogue, but I think there's also tension in the film, especially the scenes. I leave her room and then I have to confront these people who are very skeptical, and I've got to win them over. It's kind of like the directors have referenced the film 12 Angry Men, where the jurors are all deliberating and there's one guy who refuses to sentence this young boy to the death sentence, and he has to win them over one by one. And in a way that happens in the course of the film.
Real quick, actually, are you a chess player?
I play chess. I'm certainly I've enjoyed chess, but I'm not one of these people that obsessed with I knew people in high school this kid was just a mastermind at it. It's just so. I think it does lead to that bit of insanity. What was the very famous one?
Bobby Fischer.
Bobby Fischer. Yeah, Bobby Fischer. Kind of lost his mind. I think that could happen to you if you get so into it.
Yeah,
you can just get so obsessive. Are you that way?
Not obsessive, but I was in chess club. I have my trophy from 6th grade chess club. But when I was in high school, I did chess club briefly because the chess club teacher was that way. He carried a chess set in the back of his pocket, and he would recreate famous Napoleon chess matches. And I remember just sitting there, and I was like, I don't want to be here, and so I left. But,
did he have any social life at all? Did he have a personal life?
No, I don't believe so. I think because he would recreate the chess matches with himself, which I never quite understood. But.
Well, then he probably was the archetype or the person that this guy Fonda is somewhat like in a way. You just kind of remove yourself from society and you just get so obsessive about these moves. Yeah.
Is there any similarities between Fonda and yourself?
Well, on the surface, for sure. I'm a father as well of a 16-year-old daughter. So I'm a very involved parent, and there's definitely that paternal aspect to Fonda, and I think that was the key for me. Just being a very empathetic, caretaker type person who sees a child, and just I see that child within, despite all of the hostility or veneer of coldness that she initially exudes. I think that's the key for me, was being that empathetic, understanding father figure. And then he's described early on as not caring very much about his appearance, or he's a little disheveled, he doesn't care about his hair, and that wasn't very hard for me to embrace because I'm a little disheveled myself.
Uh-huh.
But it was more of that sort of sense of empathy or compassion that you try to, always see the good and the heart within, and that's what you're leading with your heart. I don't want to get too new agey here, but it's that was really his key, is that let's get at what's really going on here emotionally for this child, and let's expose it, and and how can you deny that when you see that vulnerability? And I have to bring that out in the course of the film.
Mm-hmm. How did you get involved in the film?
Well, just the boring traditional way of auditioning against a million other guys, and beating them up in the audition process. No, I mean they really. Supposedly the directors liked my initial read. That brought me back for a callback. I read with Savannah, who they, initially the film was, they had written it for a young boy, and they couldn't find a young male actor that could handle this sort of dialogue or emotional intensity. That they expanded the casting up to a girl, and they found Savannah Lyles, and completely were won over by her. And so for the callback, I was brought in to read with Savannah and make sure we had the right chemistry, and then it was a done deal. We had a couple months of preparation, and one of those things where you just call Alex every couple of weeks and say, is this film really happening? Is it going to happen?
Uh-huh.
It's what happens in a lot of independent films. It's like, is the money there? Are you guys working? Are you working on the sets? Is this really going to happen? What are the dates?
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's a luxury there because you're having a couple of months to really work on the script, and at least, you get your lines down, and then you think about the emotional beats, and so you have the time to ruminate on the role and actually create a character.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned Savannah, and it is unusual to see a young actor in or such a dialogue heavy. And I don't mean that as a negative thing, because it totally held my attention. It's just which I think is shows the strength of the movie to hold your attention. It's really mostly between two people. What was that like? What was it like to work with her?
Oh, she was great. She really was. I mean, she was really prepared. Her mom worked with her, as did the directors, and she had an acting coach on the side. I mean, she really is a 9-year-old girl when we started shooting, which is almost 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
And there's dialogue and there's words that she didn't understand what they meant. So she, it's on the very practical, technical side, she had to know exactly what she was saying and why you're saying it. Mm-hmm. And they have to roll off the tongue. So it's a technical skill to have that stuff that just pours out of your mouth that feels just genuine and natural. And the only downside is that when you're a child actor, there's a limitation to the amount of hours that you can work on a set. Mm-hmm. So for most of my close-ups, I was having to deliver my dialogue to a stand-in, a double that sometimes was her stand-in or the script supervisor. She was on the set and she had to scooch down to be the right eye length for me. And I would deliver my lines to this 30-year-old Asian woman instead of a 9-year-old freckle-faced girl, And, right. And so there's a little suspension of disbelief there, added to the suspension of disbelief you already have to work with. Mm-hmm. But when you rehearse enough, and it doesn't really matter, because I've worked with green screen where you're pretending to have some cyborg monster right. looking at you, so it doesn't matter. After a while, it's all ridiculous. So you just have to deliver what you think is a genuine, connected performance. But that's the downside, is that she's not always going to be there. But mm-hmm. the scenes with her really were really nice, really well rehearsed, and pretty easily done. We just had to figure out the blocking. Because there's a limitation, I don't know if you know this, but Alex and Brian, the co-directors, they were also production designers, and they built the sets themselves. I mean, we shot in this old abandoned animal shelter out in Riverside, California, and they had basically created these two rooms, the interrogation room, and then there's this military control room, and so they built them themselves. And when you have these rooms that are actually with four walls, you're very limited in terms of camera movement or lighting, and so you have to create that dynamic in the scene and figure out blocking, and you get very creative when you're limited that way.
Mm-hmm. What's that like to have two like co-directors? Do they butt heads at all, or is it?
No, not with each other. There was a little bit of butting heads occasionally, but not with them. I guess they're best friends from USC, and they really have a yin yang type dynamic to them. Alex was the more gregarious one, who was very hands on in terms of working with the actors. And Brian is a little more reserved, and he also handled all the technical as far as the special effects. He's the master of doing the CGI special effects and post-production. But the two of them would confer after a take, and they would look at the monitor playback and discuss with the actors. And they were always very simpatico. I mean, they knew exactly what they wanted. They really did. I mean, they'd spent a couple of years with the script, so they had really storyboarded it and kind of already saw the movie in their mind in many ways. Mm-hmm. They had really, it's a testament to preparation, mm-hmm. like you cannot prepare enough, and they really did prepare for the film.
Yeah. Do you, when you were talking earlier about, independent films, and sometimes they happen, sometimes they don't. How about that people prepare like directors on the independent level? Do you find some people are like Alex and Brian, or do you find they usually aren't as prepared?
Well, it depends. I mean, usually they are prepared because I think it's so expensive. I mean, you have to pay all the actors and the crew and location and all that, and feed them all, and there's a time restraint. I mean, when there's a budget and it's coming out of the director's / producer's pocket, and time is money, they know they better be prepared because it's going to cost them. It's usually pretty tight because of the financial restraints, and I mean, there have been times I've worked on some low budget films where things seem a little too loosey goosey, and they're trying to improvise or create a scene and start playing, and it's usually when the director is not the one that's financially responsible for the production. So then the producers come in and say, we have to move on. That's usually when a really good assistant director is, because usually the assistant director is the hard ass on the movie, on any set. They're the bad guy. They're the ones with the walkie-talkie and say, we've got to move on. I mean, I did this film called Medicine Men, and we had a brilliant assistant director who's worked with some big budget films, and his name was Nick, and terrific. And this is a first-time director who, even though he was paying for, or his family was paying for the film, he would always want another take. The director always wanted another take, and we'd be shooting till 2 a.m. And we're talking about a union shoot where he's having to pay overtime, and it's costing, every minute's costing hundreds of dollars, or every hour is costing another $500 or whatever it's going to cost. And it's like the budget is not there, and even for a low budget film, and he's like, the director would say, so how are we doing, Nick? How are we doing on time, Nick? Well, we're on the K part of fucked right now, so you better move on. So for me to go into the salty language here, that's essentially what Nick had said, and I thought it was brilliant. We're in the K part of fucked.
Yeah.
So, you have to know what you want, and a lot of directors, especially first-time directors, want to experiment, and they always think, oh man, I got to get that Paul Thomas Anderson shot, and if I can move the camera over here, how interesting would that be? They feel like they're creating the next Citizen Kane or something, Right. And so they're trying to get very creative, and their imaginations are wonderful, which is what makes them artists. They're getting very enthusiastic and inspired and say, oh, that was so good. What if we did it from over here? And what if we had it into a 2-shot? Or what if we did the from overhead? Would that lend something to it? And they start creating in the moment, and they don't realize how much time is being spent. And you're already a 13, 14-hour day, and all the crew's looking at you like, you got to be kidding me, man. What are we doing here? And everyone's exhausted. And nobody wants that pizza delivered at 2 a.m. And we have that early, dawn shot coming up the next day. They get carried away. But that wasn't like that for Prodigy.
That's good. It was interesting because I was just at Boston Underground Film Festival last week, and there was a documentary called Mex Man, and it followed a first-time director who's just has so much imagination. And the documentary kind of paints the people he's collaborating with as the villains, because they're very pragmatic about we actually have to do this within a budget and have to actually make it happen and stuff. And so it was just kind of interesting how they played off the one guy as the hero and the other guys as the villains. But at the same time, when I was watching it, you could see how frustrating it would be for the other two guys. And imagination's amazing and great, and you need it, but at the same time you still have to be pragmatic and make this happen. So I guess it's kind of a balance.
Yeah, absolutely, it's balance. I mean, it's this business is expensive. I mean, you're shooting and you're paying people, and you don't want to have to go into a huge debt by making this film. I mean, you don't want to go into a debt. I mean, you can get carried away. Like, it's like a huge student college loan suddenly that, and you have to be practical. You have this much money to spend, and this is what we've allotted for this day and this day and this day. And maybe we have 1 or 2 days extra we can possibly, if we have to, squeeze in. But you really try to cover a certain amount of pages. I mean, that's what they're saying. How far are we? Are we behind? Are we behind schedule here?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why that's why they had me having to work with the stand-in. We had to get those shots done. I couldn't wait till Savannah was back on the set. We needed a certain amount of scenes shot for us to not fall behind schedule.
Yeah.
So there is that. It's you have to make that. It's sort of a devil's bargain. You have to. Stay. You need that two sides. You need that creative and imaginative side for sure. I mean, because otherwise you'll make a boring piece of thing that nobody wants to watch. But at the same time, you have to. You have to have the funds. I mean, you have to have the funds.
Mm-hmm. So you said it was 2 months you had to prepare because things are coming together. How long did it actually take to shoot the movie?
Just 2 weeks. Just 2 straight weeks. I mean, the first week was primarily just me and Savannah in that one room. We knocked off all the scenes that were just us. And then the other cast members playing the military personnel, the other therapists, were in the other room. And I had a certain amount of scenes with them. I may have had 2 days off in there just because they have some scenes within themselves. Or just maybe 1 day off, and I would come in the other day in the afternoon, but I would have all my scenes with them. And then Savannah would have that time off. And then we had that those 2 scenes that were shot outside in a park that sort of bookend the movie that we shot in one afternoon. It's the scene of me basically being met with by my former associate who brings me into this mission. And at the very end, you see me at the same location playing chess with Savannah and with Secret Service in the background. And so we shot that. And, I had let some facial hair grow. And for the, so that was
showtime
actually for the end of the scene. So we shot the very end of the scene that exterior day first. Then I went into this restroom and shaved, and we shot the very beginning of the movie.
Uh-huh.
That's the necessity and the mother of invention there.
Right. Yeah, it's easier than now. Hey, Richard, grow a beard so we can film the end of the movie.
Right.
So what did you think when you saw the finished movie? With everything edited together and scoring.
It's interesting because they played around with different edits. That's when they got to be a little bit creative because they had all the material, and then they were playing around with different editing, different shots, and we actually did a little bit extra shooting. He wanted to create a backstory. If you notice in the beginning credits, the titles of the film, there's footage of like home movies of myself with my wife and little daughter, and then there's shots of Savannah and her mom that he shot and made it look like it was on Super 8 or so. Mm-hmm. And so we shot that after the initial screening for the cast and crew. He went back, I think it was more Alex's idea that he thought we needed a little bit of more padding in the film, a little backstory, and they also played with the idea of it being in black and white. That's his kind of a creative thing as well, is trying to, maybe we can make it all black and white, and that can cover up any sort of matching color post issues they may have had, because it is a low budget film. Mm-hmm. And they both went to USC, so they have high standards, and they played with the idea of it being black and white. And then I think they've now decided, especially once it was picked up by Gravitas for distribution, that it'd be better off to keep it in color. And so there were several versions that had come out initially, sort of a focus group screenings to see what people thought, and they took some notes from other people, colleagues, directors, mentors that they knew, and that's why they got this version here. I don't remember your initial question.
About watching it for the first time, after it's edited together. And,
yeah. Well, it's always nerve-wracking watching yourself on the big screen. It's nerve-wracking because you see every little imperfection, and you're just so narcissistic. You just watch yourself. It's a really disgusting experience. It's just sort of. I don't know. Maybe other people are more happy about watching. I just see every little imperfection or something I could have done better, and you come away with a sense of self-loathing, but people are very, and you don't believe anybody around you, even your family or my daughter. Oh, Dad, you were great. Okay, yeah. And you're just suspicious of everybody's compliments. At least that's my sick mind. I don't trust anybody. About this value. I mean, and then how do you really look at something you've been part of for so long? How do you see it objectively? Because you've lived it. You've memorized, you've seen it all, you know all the nonsense that went behind the scenes, and you see everything that that magic that people experience as a film viewer. That's the problem with me as an actor, and I'm so jaded. I've seen thousands of movies. I'm a total film geek, and so most of the time I watch films, and I'm looking at the camera angle. I'm watching the actors' choices all the time. Like, oh, the actor's doing that there and this there, and I'm constantly analyzing films and why they're doing what they're doing, and so I'm a terrible audience member because I can't really. I mean, even watching a classic like even watching a classic film like Singing in the Rain or Groundhog Day, which I've seen 1 billion times with my daughter. I mean, I still like, how did Harold Ramis do this? And such an interesting shot here, and the editing here is just so brilliant. So I love films. I just love films, but it's hard for me to watch myself and get lost in the movie. I mean, I'm just really I want the audience to like it, and I'm really hoping that people get something out of it. Like and the filmmakers get to make another film. I get to work in another film. So I see, as an actor, you're always like, okay, so what am I doing tomorrow? This film is wrapped today, but do I have a set or do I have a job tomorrow? So you're always, it's sort of that bittersweet feeling like, okay, that's in the can. Now what do I do?
Do you actually have something in the works?
Well, not really right this moment. I have a few things coming out. I just did another video. Well, it's not a video game. It's a graphic anthology series that I play a character in this Tim Miller directed piece. It's a series for Netflix. Tim Miller directed Deadpool, and David Fincher is actually the executive producer on it.
Oh, wow.
So and that's supposed to come out. These things are ridiculous how long they can take, but it may not even be out till 2019, hopefully before then. And then I have a couple films I just wrapped. This one called Clyde Cooper, which is sort of a sci-fi film noir hybrid. It's kind of a weird film by this director named Peter Daskaloff, and it's I think it could be an interesting movie. It's very it just seems very relevant to our times. And then I have another couple of films, one called Nothing Like the Sun, which is a 1940s period piece, sort of a post-Depression era piece. I play the father of the lead in that. So I've got some other things in the works. And I do video games. I did Horizon Zero Dawn, The Frozen Wilds last year, and I've got other couple of things that are pending. So we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
How do you fall into that, into doing voiceovers for video games?
Well, like everything else, one thing leads to another.
Sure.
I've always wanted to do. People say, "Oh, you have a voice. You have a voice.
Uh-huh.
You should, do voiceover." and I took classes and got a demo reel together and shopped around for an agent and to do commercial voiceovers is incredibly competitive, and I've done a handful of spots, but it seems easier for me as an actor to get into video games and to play characters. It's much more fun as well to actually act using your voice instead of being a voice in a 30-second commercial.
Sure.
But just auditioning and then lucking out and getting the gig. I've got a couple of jobs this week coming up. One for I'm doing a narration for a biographical film, but I really enjoy the video games just because it's so primal in terms of our acting tools. It's just a total suspension of disbelief and playing pretend, and especially when for the Horizon Zero Dawn game, I got to be in a motion capture suit for a couple of months.
Oh, cool!
And that was so cool, man. Basically, you're turned into a cartoon. Like out of Roger Rabbit, you're literally turned into a cartoon, and you're walking around in this motion capture suit. It's kind of like an astronaut space suit, and you have this gear on your head with a light shining in your face. It's filming your facial expressions, so they're capturing your mouth movements and the expression in your eyes, and then you're turned into a cartoon. I made a joke about it when I was on the set. Like they showed me the design, the illustration of the character I was playing, which was this kind of Inuit warrior chieftain, and he looked like Dwayne Johnson, just total muscle-bound, huge guy. And I go, wow, man, I'm going to have to start doing some push-ups here. And they said, no, don't worry about it. We've got the illustrators are handling that part. Don't worry about that. Mm-hmm. Because anyway, but it was a blast. You get to work with other actors. Some are just voice actors. I don't mean to disparage their backgrounds, but they really do exclusively do voice acting. And then others come from a more film and TV world, and some are stunt people. And so there's this incredible other world where people do this voice acting. Like the woman I worked with, who's the heroine of Horizon Zero Dawn, Ashley Birch, who is, I don't think she's even 25 or 26 now, but has this huge following. And she's been playing the games since she was 4 or 5, and now is a designer of the games. And she works for Nickelodeon, and she has this massive following, and she does a lot of little girl voices and sort of anime type voices. And that's all she does, is she writes for Nickelodeon, and she does voice acting. Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing that, to me, coming from the theater background and doing the traditional things as an actor, that you can just do that for a living.
Mm-hmm. So you said, that you just love movies. So what were some of the movies like that you watch and made you want to make movies, become an actor?
Well, I guess when I was really, really young, we were watching movies on TV, and I remember just totally digging James Cagney.
Uh-huh.
I thought, you sort of romanticize the tough guy thing when you're, Cagney was just so charismatic, and in those films like The Roaring Twenties or Angels with Dirty Faces, and I like the John Garfield and or Paul Muni. They made me a criminal, or I was a fugitive of a chain gang. Those are the earliest films, and then later on, when I really started watching films as aspiring actor, I think it was Brando, and when I first saw On the Waterfront, that completely blew my mind. I mean, this was acting of a whole nother world.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seemed like, oh my God, how do you do that?
They really changed acting in movies after that too.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, you see On the Waterfront, it's like nothing. You can't. What is everybody else doing? I mean, even you see, what is Henry Fonda or Jimmy Stewart doing? Robert Mitchum, they're just playing themselves. And you see Brando, it's like, what? And then and then even a film like Last Tango in Paris. I mean, you're wondering where does that fit into film history? I mean, is he just playing himself? Is this just therapy? Is that acting as therapy? That he's just revealing who he is and all of his sick mind and sensuality and everything thrown into this role? And in a way, I think that people said you were watching Brando probably, energized and motivated actors, but also probably destroyed a lot of actors because all of people just want to copy Brando. Or they emulated Brando so much that he just, everybody wanted to be that revelatory and that, wonderful. I mean, even, people like Paul Newman were like, what is Brando doing? I mean, everybody's in awe of Brando, especially those early films,
I mean, like I said, it did change how people acted. It was ushered in the method acting.
Yeah. Instead of just being present, it seemed like something else. It seemed transformative. There was something that was dangerous and surprising about what he was doing, and he was so compelling to watch. And you wonder why that was. It was just because he was so good looking and he had such presence, but he also seemed to be so present in the moment that he was really listening and nothing was calculated, that you never were sure what he would do. That was always an element of surprise and danger about his work. So I think I think if you can take anything away from that as an aspiring actor, I think that's what you should try to emulate, to be that present. And that's surprising. I think that's the trick of good acting anyway, is to keep people surprising. I mean, I think people like Malkovich and Sean Penn have been able to do that. And, there's so many good actors now. I mean, Jessica Lange in the movie Frances. I remember us being in theater school, seeing that film and just like, wow, Jessica Lange was amazing in that film.
So that's a weird question, but the show is primarily horror, but I myself like all movies. To me, if it's good, I like it. But do you have any? Are you a horror movie fan, and do you have any favorite horror movies?
Well, there certainly have been some great horror films. I remember in high school, The Exorcist. I saw The Exorcist for the first time. I know it's probably cliche to say that, but it just so creeped me out. I remember not even being able to walk upstairs in my house because I was so afraid. In Fincher's Seven, I think
that's great.
There's been so many great. I mean, obviously, Silence of the Lambs, I guess, is a horror film, and in a way, Prodigy. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the film that people kind of consider a little bit of the Hannibal Lecter with Savannah's child role.
Yeah, definitely. Which is that's what I thought when I first started watching it. But it's much different. But it is kind of that same idea with the therapist and the dangerous, which I always like. That's what I always like about Silence of Lambs is above the other sequels, is because he's very dangerous, but he's behind, well, not bars, but he's in a cell, so he can't get out. And there's something about that, like that he's so dangerous that he can't even have any interaction with anybody. And it's actually similar to Prodigy. Yeah, I think that's scarier than when he's out in the later ones.
Yeah, Hopkins was just so good.
Yeah. And Exorcist, I don't think any exorcism movie has ever come, even close to The Exorcist. And like, it's like 30 years later or 40 years later, and just none of them are. I think same with Jaws. I think, there's no shark movies or anything like Jaws, and there's no Exorcist movies.
Oh, I know. Jaws was amazing. Yeah, I remember seeing that. And then the acting in Jaws, all those actors were just so good.
That's to me, that's really what makes a movie is the three of them together, and they're so different, and then the interaction.
That's true. You got Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss and Shaw, right? Robert Shaw.
Yeah. Just the scene you go on.
Good. No, you go ahead.
I was saying the scene of them, when they're comparing the battle with the scars, and then they start to sing and stuff. Like, to me, that's the best scene of the movie.
Yeah, it makes me want to see that film again right now.
Yeah, and I live not far where they filmed it. So.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I live.
You're in Massachusetts, right? You're in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I live on Cape Cod, which is close to.
Oh, great!
When they filmed it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love it up there. We were just there. In fact, right now, this past week, that's why I'm calling you from New York. We're about to go back to Los Angeles. I've been on a college tour with my daughter, and we actually went a little bit in that area. Went up to Boston and Amherst. We went to Emerson and then Hampshire College in Amherst. And so we saw a little bit of that country, but unfortunately didn't make it up there to the Cape Cod or Martha's Vineyard, but I love it up there.
Yeah, that's a good area. Actually, I was when I was at the Boston Underground. It's such a long thing to say. Boston Underground Film Festival last week. That was near Emerson. It was in Cambridge, near Harvard. And stuff, so.
Right by the Commons there. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's interested in Emerson. We were checking it out. Sort of a more of a not as intense as NYU as far as a city experience, but you're still in the city. Boston is still it seems somewhat of a manageable city in many ways than New York. New York can be so overwhelming. Yeah,
and the public transportation's good in Boston and all those areas, and you can take the T all around, and
that's what
things aren't
talking about.
Yeah, that's what I do. I go up there and just take the T everywhere, or Uber if it's somewhere a little far away. But yeah, it's a nice city.
Yeah,
things aren't open as late as New York, though.
Right, that's what I worry about with my daughter. You could be in Brooklyn at 2 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah, and just for lover of films, there's some great theaters up there, at Coolidge Theater in Brookline, and the Brattle Theater in Cambridge, because they show a lot of stuff that they don't show anywhere else, a lot of art house stuff, and then they show a lot of weird stuff at Coolidge, like they do midnight movies every weekend, which is really fun. Even, like, that's how I saw Exorcist not that long ago. Even if you see the movie a million times, when you see it on the big screen, it's a totally different experience.
Oh, I know. I know for sure, man. I love it. I mean, this great thing about Los Angeles, we also have those revival repertory type houses. I mean, I raised my daughter early on in some classics like, Ford's The Searchers, or even the Marx Brothers, which we, own. And I remember us going to, I guess it was 8 years ago or so, they had a couple of Marx Brothers films at the Egyptian Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. And Harpo's son was there, and some biographers were there to introduce. So it was great to see Animal Crackers on the big screen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's film from 1932 or whatever it is. Yeah. I mean, it's totally different, to see it on the big screen.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen some silent movies on the big screen, and some of them had like live orchestras, and it's just I saw the.
Oh, I have too, man.
I love that stuff.
I have too. I love that. I remember seeing back in the 80s. I saw Coppola had he restored and released the Abel Gance's Napoleon, and his father Carmine Coppola composed this whole new score for it. So they had a live orchestra at Radio City, and it was showing Abel Gance's Napoleon. It was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just something about it. It was for Halloween 2 years ago. They had Phantom of the Opera, the original, the old silent one. And then they had
Lon Chaney.
Yeah, and with the live orchestra, it honestly was one of the best experiences I ever had at the theater. I just loved it.
It's extraordinary. I know. I remember when I was in college, I remember seeing, I don't know if it was on college or at MoMA in New York, but seeing City Lights, Chaplin's film on the big screen. That is one of the greatest films ever made, period. Yeah. I don't care, silent, talkie, whatever. You see City Lights on the big screen. Because he shot that, and talkies had already taken place. And there's this famous still photo of Einstein showing up at the premiere of City Lights. It was like 1932 or something like that.
Yeah, that's wild to think about, yeah.
Yeah, but how daring and how, of a fuck you to the industry. He says, nah, I'm going to make a silent film still. I don't care.
Yeah.
And that's an extraordinarily moving movie. I mean, it's so moving at the end when the blind girl realizes that this guy who's been her, person that's been helping her out, is this tramp. It's so heartbreaking. Oh my gosh.
It's what I always get annoyed, like on Facebook, if I say I'm going to the movies, whatever, and someone they'll be like, "Oh, why don't you just download it?" It's like, for one thing, I don't want to, rip the movie off, and it's not the same experience watching it on your computer or your phone or something, or even on your TV as watching it on the big screen. So I always try to encourage people to. Because I'm sure everyone, wherever you are, you have some type of theater like that in some distance from you. So you should, go up there and try to support stuff like that. Because once those theaters close, usually they're just gone forever.
That's true. Fortunately, Tarantino has bought out the New Beverly Cinema in Hollywood, and he is very, very intent on keeping that experience alive. He shows a double bill every night, and he's got a huge library himself, but he gets a lot of films loaned to him for the experience. So it's great, and he keeps it very cheap. I don't know what the ticket price is, something like $6 or $8 to go see his movie.
That's great.
Extraordinary,
Yeah, that's awesome. So how can people follow Prodigy online?
Well, I know that on Facebook there's a Prodigy site, Prodigy the Film. So that's definitely the way. Go on Facebook and like it and follow Prodigy.
And how about yourself? Are you? You
can find me on Facebook too. I'm still, I have to join the 21st century and get on Twitter and Instagram, but I'm not yet. So. I don't know. I'm old school and watching films on the big screen. I'm afraid of, getting, I just did a podcast and they said, well, we have 500,000 viewers, and I'm like, oh God, do I want 500,000 followers? I mean, I know Ricky Gervais gets in a lot of trouble for his tweets, and I could just imagine me getting in trouble as well. Tweeting things, just like, do I really want that dialogue? I don't know. Maybe part of me does. I think I'm enough of a narcissist as it is. But you can find me. If you want to find me, you can find me for sure. I'm on Facebook, and I don't care.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. Years, I forget the year, but one of the listeners of the show, at the time we weren't on Facebook, and they were like, oh, this is new thing, Facebook. I think you guys should, get on there. And I was like, I don't really care. He's like, well, it's okay if I make you a Facebook page for the Without Your Head. I was like, yeah, go ahead. And, of course, years later, it's thousands of people on there. But I always think it's funny that, I just thought, whatever. I mean,
well, that's the way I am, too. I'm very cavalier. Yeah, I'm very cavalier about the whole thing, too. I mean, really? It's like, gosh, I hardly watch. I do watch TV occasionally. Certainly, if I audition for shows, I watch a couple episodes. But I don't spend a whole lot of time. I know it seems sacrilegious, and for a lot of people, very stupid for me not to watch TV. But I feel like I wouldn't read if I watch so much TV. And I don't really. Part of me also doesn't like to watch a lot of other actors. Part of me is competitive, and I, you know, I'm sort of jaded. I've seen, you know, I watched a lot of films. I see films. I'm not living in a hovel somewhere or in a hole somewhere. My head in head in the sand. You know, I mean, there were a lot of good films this year. I loved Shape of Water and Lady Bird and The Square, which was amazing. You see that foreign film, The Square?
No, I haven't seen
it. It was
that.
nominated for Best Foreign Film. Very interesting movie. But there were, you know, I go see a lot of films in the theater as well, and so I'm not completely shut out. But I think there's so much content out there constantly, and you know, it's like, do I really want to get into that? Of people who are so obsessed with Game of Thrones, or obsessed with Homeland, or obsessed with the New Girl, like my daughter is, or whatever. You know, I mean, it's like your life. Do I really want to get involved? I mean, I don't know. I'm just occasionally I watch a ball game, you know, or a documentary, because to me I'd rather watch something that's real, that's going on in real time. Like I might watch the Mets game this afternoon, and you know, or I really like a good documentary. You know, like Brando used to watch Candid Camera. Do you know that Brando would watch Candid Camera because it was like, you know, before, you know, it's like surveillance videos. You can watch people actually, without them knowing they're being filmed, see how they really behave in real life without knowing they're being watched.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting thing, you know.
Did you see the documentary Lost Soul about Richard Stanley and about his
I did. Oh my gosh. I actually went to the there was a movie theater. I think it might have closed now. The Silent Movie Theater on Fairfax in Los Angeles. But there was a screening of it there, and Stanley showed up, the director, and he talked about it. Sad. It's really sad what happened to him.
Yeah, it was actually one of my favorite interviews on the website. Cheap plug is I interviewed Richard Stanley last year. It's like 2.5 hours, and I think it's fantastic. And yeah, the movie itself is both. It's very depressing that you see like what, because he's so into this. This is like his dream project, and then to see it all, you know, fall apart, and then really hasn't really done anything since then. But there's also a lot of there's also a lot of humor in it at the same time. It's I don't know, that whole documentary. I just love that whole thing.
Oh, I loved it. It was great.
Yeah.
I love films like that. You know, The Bird in Their Dreams about Herzog.
Yes.
Werner Herzog, or the one that Coppola's wife made about Apocalypse Now.
Yeah. I don't think it's called The Horror, but I know what you mean. I saw that one. There's also one, My Best Fiend, with about Herzog and Klaus Kinski.
Oh yeah, My Best Fiend. I love that film. Yeah, where you see that footage of Kinski with the butterflies. Yeah, he's an interesting fellow. I watched all of Herzog's movies, and I've gone to screenings that Herzog's been at, and Fitzcarraldo and Aguirre, The Wrath of God, and you know,
that's one of my favorite. That's probably my favorite.
And it's a great thing about being in a city like New York is that you get to go to these screenings and the directors show up.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
well, it's great that you got to interview. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it was. Well, Werner Herzog actually was at the Coolidge here in Boston a couple weeks ago, which was really cool. But yeah, Richard Stanley, and he didn't know because I just do audio, but unless I'm in the same area, I have videos. But so it was Skype, and he thought it was a Skype video interview, which I wish I would have figured out how to record that beforehand, because he was in his abandoned. He really does live in like an abandoned castle in France, so it was just like this crazy background, and he's like lighting up whatever he's smoking. I was like, man,
was he wearing his big cowboy hat there?
He was wearing the big hat. And I was like, this is like really surreal. I wish I was recording the video.
Oh my Lord! I remember seeing that movie, The Island of Dr. Moreau, in the theater because I was such a I mean, I would see Brando in anything, but it was such a bad movie. And I love how Frankenheimer supposedly said about Val Kilmer, I wouldn't work with Val Kilmer again, even if it was the life story of Val Kilmer.
Yeah.
And there's an actor that probably shot himself.
Oh,
I mean, talk about throwing it all away. Oh, my.
Yeah. He was as big as he could be. And then pretty much just fell off the earth. He's kind of making a comeback the last couple of years, but...
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's very... I remember I loved him as Jim Morrison. I thought he was great.
Oh, yeah. I saw that at the theater, and I always remember there was like these two, I guess, old hippies in front of me, and the whole time they were talking to the screen. They were like, "Don't do it, Jim." Oh no! And I'm thinking, are you gonna think you're gonna change time, or like he's somehow gonna live? But it was a fun experience. So, another documentary I have it here somewhere is because I always find it's super depressing. I think Lost in La Mancha.
Oh yes, Terry Gilliam.
Yeah.
They referenced that. I just saw this film, Voyage to Spain, the one with Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon. Did you ever see those films?
No.
Their travel where they play basically versions of themselves, and they're supposedly going to be reviewing restaurants. They travel a trip to Italy. One's called The Trip. It's just Rob Brydon and Steve Coogan. I think you'd enjoy them. They're a great sense of humor, and they sort of battle impersonations. They do battling Michael Caine or Al Pacino, and so this last one, they do a trip through Spain, and they mention that Lost in La Mancha film.
Oh, nice.
They also are staying in this castle where supposedly Brando, going back to Brando referencing here, Brando was played the Pope in that Christopher Columbus movie towards the end of his life. They're sitting in the room, and so they're impersonating Brando in this room. And Rob Brydon's doing it, and Coogan's like, "Why are you doing him as the Godfather? He's not the Godfather. Why are you doing that?" "Cause are you Catholic? Are you?" So, anyway, you should check it out. It's on Netflix.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's very entertaining. It's lightweight, but they're very entertaining.
It's okay. Yeah. Like I said, I like all different. It depends what kind of mood you're in. You like dark stuff, light stuff, whatever. Like I said, I think if it's good, I like it. When you mentioned earlier about Silence of the Lambs, if it's horror, there is like a lot of horror people who will argue like genre films, like they'll just fight about like Silence of the Lambs thriller, it's not horror. Seven's thriller, not horror.
Right.
Alien, science fiction. And I don't know. I
mean, is Aliens? Is that a horror or thriller?
Yeah, and it's like to me, it's just like, well, would I like it less or more if I consider it horror or science fiction? Like, no. So what difference does it make? I don't know.
I mean, Sixth Sense is a great film. That's not really a horror film, but I guess it verges into that genre a little bit. Yeah.
Another one, Shape of Water. A lot of people you argue about.
Last night they had on the TV. We were just scrolling here, and Beetlejuice was on again, which is such a funny film.
Yeah.
And that's certainly not horror, but there's aspects of it. I mean, they have these ghosts.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I consider comedy horror. Again, it's like, to me, I just don't really get wrapped up in what genre movie. If you enjoy it, you enjoy it. That's how I look at it.
Exactly. A good film is a good film.
Yeah. Like, you're not gonna, I wouldn't think anyway, you wouldn't be like, oh, I don't like this movie now because it's considered horror, or I like it now because it's considered, science fiction or something. That would just be bizarre.
Right.
Well, I really enjoyed talking to you. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, Neil, likewise.
So I hope people check out. Yeah, I hope people check out Prodigy. I really enjoyed it, and I see a lot of screeners throughout for doing the show, and I have to admit a lot of them I don't finish. But Prodigy, like, held my attention. I really dug the movie, and when I see something I like to let everyone know about it.
Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate your support and helping to spread the word, and thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. Oh, real quick, another documentary at the top of my mind, because I watched it I was really sick a couple of years ago, and I spent months in the hospital and rehab. And so I watch a lot of things. I'm better now, but watch a lot of all kinds of stuff. I binge watch some TV shows, but Life Itself, the Roger Ebert documentary. And when I watched it,
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I loved it. It was because I watched it as a weird frame of mind because I was dying, and then this is about the death of Roger Ebert, and it's very at first like you think it's going to be very depressing, and it is, but by the end of it, it's like uplifting because he's like come to terms with it and he's happy with his life, and so it ends up being a really uplifting movie. I really and I grew up watching Siskel and Ebert, so it was
yeah, me too. I mean, did you see? We were staying at a hotel in our college tour here, and I got to watch the HBO thing about Gary Shandling, the Judd Apatow man.
Yeah,
did you see that?
Yeah, that's awesome. That was another. Yeah, I love Gary Shandling show, and
I mean that's also him Shandling dealing with his imminent death and how beautifully he was handling it all and got very spiritual and loving, and he touched all these people's lives, and it was really sweet movie.
Yeah. Do you know who Angus Scrimm is? He played the tall man in the Phantasm movies.
No, I don't.
So we, my friend at the time, Annabelle, used to be on the show. We interviewed him. It wasn't much before he died, and he was really open about knowing that he was dying. He's very old. And that was some people think it's depressing again, but I don't know. I found something uplifting about it because he was happy about all the things he's done, and he was came to terms with his life was coming to an end, and so to me it was a real special interview show. So.
It's great, man. It's great that you got a chance to do that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure you saw the one that Scorsese did on George Harrison. Did you see that one?
I haven't seen that actually.
It was on. I think it was on Netflix. It may still be. It's a 3-hour. There's an intermission, and it's really beautiful. And there's a guy that also. I mean, just talk about a guy that came to terms with his death. His son Danny's in it. And everybody's interviewed in the film. Of course, they had complete access to everyone and his wife, and Danny says, I'm not going to be around, and this is all sort of an illusion here. I love you very much, but this is just a temporary world we're in, kind of thing. And he was so. I mean, talk about a guy sort of like. He just basically said, the only reason I'm here anymore is just to be a father. And I kind of feel that sense in a way, like you sort of served your purpose. It's nothing he wanted to accomplish anymore. He had wonderful relationships. He had incredible how many diverse relationships he had. What's his name? Jackie Stewart, the race car driver. Or he had, his friendships with the people from Monty Python. He had a very diverse group of friends, obviously people from the spiritual world, the musical world, and they all sort of blended together. But at the same time, he was like, I'm just, waiting here. You're sort of living. I think it was called living in the material world. And he would just like live on his estate and get up early in the morning. He refused to let anybody else work on the landscaping of the land. He'd be out there with a tractor or figuring out where a certain rock or pond should be or a certain plant. And it was sort of his meditation. But it's a really life-affirming film to watch. I think you'd enjoy it.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to watch that. I just read something recently about him, and since you mentioned Python and his whole, because he created a studio basically just to fund Life of Brian, so he could,
exactly.
So he could see it be made, which I thought was like a amazing story,
Yeah, they basically come to him. I know. He said, "Listen, let's just do it. I'll just do it. I'll make this production company. I want to see this film."
Yeah.
I want to see the film. And he himself showed up as an extra. You see him in this film as one of the followers.
Yeah.
in the background. You certainly had the facial hair and the hair for it, so you just put them in the...
Very cool. Well, again, it's awesome to talk to you, and I'll love to have you back sometime.
Yeah, next time let's just do it again, man.
Yo, this is Marshall Hilton from Primal Rage, Bigfoot Reborn, and you're listening to Nasty, the nastiest of Neal, on the station of decapitationwithoutyourhead.com.